He stood alone under the spotlight. The music swelled around him, but he couldn't hear it. He never had. Born profoundly deaf, he had lived his whole life in a world where cheers were invisible, clapping meant nothing, and ovations were just people waving their hands. But that night, something changed. He finished his routine, held his final pose, and the entire room erupted. The crowd stood, feet stomped, applause thundered through the walls, but not through him. What happened next wasn't sound, it was sensation. The floor beneath his feet shook. For the first time in his life, he didn't need ears to know he had moved a crowd. The stage had spoken to him in the only language he could understand. This is the story of a boy who couldn't hear the music but learned to dance anyway, who couldn't hear applause until he felt it rise up through his bones. And once he did, he would never stop moving. Elijah was born into silence, but not the peaceful kind. It was the kind that unsettled doctors, worried parents, and confused teachers. He didn't startle at slamming doors, didn't turn his head when his name was called, didn't coo at lullabies or hum with cartoons. His parents noticed, so did the world. At first, people said things like, maybe he's just slow to respond. Some babies take longer, but the test came and the words followed. Profoundly deaf, bilateral hearing loss, will require alternative communication methods. To the medical world, Elijah became a file, a diagnosis, a checklist of limitations. But to his parents, he was a boy with wide eyes and restless hands. A boy who felt the hum of the washing machine with his cheek against the floor, who watched rain hit the window pane like a choreographed dance, who loved to sit barefoot on the hardwood just to feel the footsteps of his father approaching. Elijah didn't hear the world, he felt it. He learned early that other kids heard things he didn't. The whistle that ended recess, the laugh behind his back, the music at birthday parties, the songs everyone else somehow knew by heart. At school, he wore a cochlear implant for a while. It helped a little, but the world it offered felt thin, hollow, artificial, like trying to taste music through a straw. He'd watch other kids bounce to rhythms, clap to beats, sing loudly in chorus while he mouthed words he'd never heard. He didn't want pity. He didn't want noise. He wanted to belong. But the world around him moved to a sound he couldn't catch, and no one slowed down long enough to let him find his own rhythm. So Elijah learned to read lips, to track movement, to pay attention in a way most people never had to. He could tell when someone was about to speak before they opened their mouth. He could sense tension in the air like a shift in weather. He noticed what others didn't, because when you live without sound, you become fluent in everything else. But still, he had never truly felt heard, not until the day he stepped into the auditorium and the walls began to shake. What he discovered inside would change the meaning of sound and stage forever. It happened by accident, like most of the moments that change us. Elijah had gotten lost during lunch. The school's new wing was still unfamiliar, and he'd wandered toward a hallway that pulsed with color and movement. Drawn by flickering lights and blurred shadows, he opened a heavy door and stepped inside the auditorium. He didn't hear the music, but he felt it instantly. The bass from the speakers rolled through the floor and crawled up his legs like thunder in his bones. Boom, boom, boom. Each kick of the drum vibrated through his sneakers. Every clap echoed not in his ears, but in his spine. He stopped at the edge of the stage, eyes wide. The dancers moved in perfect coordination. Their feet hit the floor like punctuation marks. Their arms sliced the air like phrases. And though he couldn't hear the soundtrack, Elijah could see it, feel it. It wasn't choreography. It was language, a new kind, one he instantly understood. He stayed frozen for the full routine, heart pounding to the rhythm he couldn't hear. When the music cut off, he didn't realize until the dancers stopped moving. Then came the applause, deafening though he couldn't hear it. But the reaction wasn't lost on him, because the floor, that same floor that had carried the bass, the same one that told his feet the music was alive, began to shake again, not from the instruments, from the people, stomping, clapping, cheering, and for the first time in his life, Elijah felt something rise through the soles of his feet that he had never known: recognition. He watched the dancers take their bows, watched how the spotlight caught the sweat on their brows, how they smiled like they had just said something and the world actually heard it. And deep in his chest, a quiet question began to form. What if I could speak this way too? What if I didn't need words or sound to be understood? That night, he didn't sleep. He stood in his room, eyes closed, replaying the vibrations over and over until his fingers twitched and his feet moved like they were waiting for a beat that only he could feel. Could a boy who couldn't hear learn to dance with others who never had to think about it? The next day, Elijah did something he rarely did. He asked, using sign language and a few practiced words. He approached the dance teacher after school and pointed to the stage, then to himself, then signed, "Me." "Try?" The instructor hesitated, not because she didn't believe in him, but because she wasn't sure how to teach a dancer who couldn't hear the music. How will he stay on beat? How will he know when to move? How will he hear the cue? But Elijah wasn't asking for certainty. He was asking for a chance. So she gave him one. She placed him in the back row of the beginner class. No pressure, no spotlight, just a spot to move. And from the moment his foot hit the floor, everything changed. Elijah didn't hear the rhythm, but he could feel it. He studied the other dancers not just with his eyes, but with his whole body. He matched the motion of their shoulders, the bend in their knees, the moment their weight shifted just before a leap. He wasn't counting beats. He was memorizing motion, reading the room like a living metronome. After practice, he'd stay late, remove his shoes, stand barefoot near the corner speaker where the vibrations were strongest. Boom, boom, boom. He let the rhythm climb up through the soles of his feet and settle deep in his chest. His progress was slow, but it was real. Other students started to notice. They stopped seeing him as the deaf kid, started seeing him as something else, a natural. They began clapping in a rhythm he could feel, stomping instead of snapping, even pausing mid-routine to sign encouragement. The room adapted, not out of pity, but out of respect. Because Elijah wasn't just dancing. He was translating music into something you could see. Every turn, every jump, every still moment between movements was charged with the kind of presence you can't teach in any language. He didn't learn to dance like everyone else. He danced like someone who had something to say, and finally found a way to say it. But would the world beyond his classroom understand his language of movement or overlook it again? The auditorium was packed. Parents, siblings, friends, rows of chatter, last-minute programs fluttering, phones in shaky hands. It was the annual spring recital, a big one, a final chance for students to show what they'd become. Elijah's name was listed last. No special mention, no asterisk, just one name, one number, Solo 14, Elijah Reyes. He stood in the wings, his heart pounding a rhythm he couldn't hear, but could feel. The lights dimmed, the room hushed, and his cue began, not through a sound, but through a pulse, deep, slow, rising through the stage like a heartbeat. Boom, boom, boom. The floor vibrated beneath him, his only guide, and he stepped into the light. His body moved like a ripple through silence, not mimicking the music, but responding to it from the inside out. Every movement had weight, every turn intention, every pause felt like a held breath from the crowd itself. The audience didn't know whether to cheer or stay quiet, so they did the only thing that felt right. They watched, and in that silence, Elijah spoke, not with words, not with lyrics, but with pure presence. He leapt, he spun, he stopped, frozen in perfect stillness as the final beat pulsed through the floor. And then, nothing. No sound, no movement, just a boy standing still, bathed in light. And then, the eruption. The crowd leapt to its feet, stomping, clapping, crying, not because he was deaf, not because they were surprised, but because they had felt something they didn't expect. And Elijah, he didn't hear the applause. He felt the tremor in the stage beneath him, the boards shaken, the echo of joy through the wood and steel. And he smiled, not because the crowd finally accepted him, but because he had finally accepted himself. He didn't need the sound. He had found the frequency of belonging. And that night, the stage vibrated louder than any ovation ever could. What he built from that moment would change stages and students around the world. That one performance, that 3-minute solo, traveled farther than Elijah ever imagined. Someone's dad had filmed it, posted it with the caption, "He danced like he wrote the music without hearing a single note." It went viral, not because of pity, not because of novelty, but because something in it rang true, even to those who could hear. He wasn't dancing to impress. He was dancing to connect, to remind us that expression isn't tied to ability, it's tied to presence. And presence he had in abundance. Elijah started getting messages from other kids like him, from parents, from dance teachers who said, "I never knew how to include my deaf students until now." He answered them not with long speeches, but with structure, with space. He created a program called Feel the Floor. It started small, a workshop in his old gym, with donated speakers and wooden planks laid out like puzzle pieces. But it grew, because he built it for people who had never been handed a rhythm, but had one in them all along. He taught kids how to feel choreography through vibration, how to partner with sight, with breath, with weight. He trained hearing dancers to communicate through eye contact, to count with shoulders, not sound. In his studio, music wasn't always playing, but movement never stopped. The floor became a shared language. Every stomp was a sentence, every stillness a question, every tremor a chorus. And even now, years later, he returns to that same auditorium where it all began, sometimes to perform, sometimes just to stand, to close his eyes, take off his shoes, and feel the quiet thunder rising up through his soles. Because long after the music fades, the stage still speaks, and Elijah, he still listens. Some people hear applause, some feel it, some learn to speak with sound, others with movement, rhythm, stillness. Elijah never needed ears to understand belonging. He just needed a floor willing to speak back. a space that could translate vibration into validation, and a world willing to listen differently. His story isn't just about dance, it's about what happens when we stop assuming that silence means emptiness. Because sometimes the quietest person in the room has the most powerful rhythm inside them. Maybe you've felt that too, like your voice didn't quite fit the world around you, like your story couldn't be told in the way others expected. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that expression isn't about sound, but about soul, share it. Leave a comment. What's a moment where you felt seen, even when you couldn't be heard? And if you believe in stories that celebrate unseen strength, unheard brilliance, and unspoken courage, subscribe to Able in every way, because not every voice is loud, but every voice deserves to be felt.